on, everybody. I'll be there in a moment. Hold on. Oh, man. I am just not feeling great today. Just really under the weather, you know? And just coincidentally, we happen to be discussing Doc Q's sick fruit video today. It's just weird how things line up, you know? Okay. Well, as you can imagine, the ability to control diseases and afflict them on others, essentially creating plagues to decimate a bunch of people at once. That's a very, very powerful devil fruit ability, right? In fact, it sort of reminds me of something. Remember the plague times? Anyway, talking about the Shiku no Mi today, which is a devil fruit that seems perfectly suited for a sickly old man that is Doc Q, the doctor of the Blackbeard Pirates, except he really isn't a sickly old man. No, Doc Q is canonically 28 years old. Yeah, I am 4 years older than the sickly old guy that's about to pass out in One Piece every single time we see him, right? Also, coincidentally enough, out of all of the original members of the Blackbeard crew, including Blackbeard himself, Doc Q had the highest bounty before joining the crew, 72 million. Now, he was from the North Blue, so I don't really know what the highest average bounty in the North is. I've always imagined the North Blue was the most dangerous sea, as the East Blue is always stated to be the most peaceful. Arlong had the highest bounty at 20 million, and then, of course, Luffy has the highest bounty at 30 million now. But, yeah, the North Blue, a little bit more of a rough and tumble kind of place, so the highest bounty averages are probably quite a bit larger than the East. But still, 72 million without even being in the Grand Line yet, that's pretty impressive. Very dangerous guy, and also you might think that he had the sick fruit to begin with, right? Maybe that was a side effect of the fruit, that it makes him constantly sick and you know, disease-ridden and just very weak, and he can't really do much. And that disease might also extend to his horse and loyal companion, Stronger, who he's always seen riding on top of. The catch is, Stronger is just as sick as Doc Q, so the horse can barely, you know, there's that expression, that there's two expressions, really. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, of which Doc Q always hands out explosive apples like he's some character from a fairy tale. And then there's Stronger, who is always healthy as a horse, except he's not that healthy, right? So you could simply say that a byproduct of the Shiku, the sick fruit, is that it just makes the user perpetually sick, never to the point where they're gonna die, but just constantly makes them ill and coughing, and they won't be able to do much. And then anybody around them also gets sick, because Doc Q is always constant contact with his horse, so you would assume that it spreads that way, like a contagion. But that doesn't seem to be the case. At least that's not what Law said. Now, Law might be incorrect about this, we're not really sure, but when Law was facing off against the Blackbeard crew, he listed all of the different abilities that the Blackbeard crew had at their disposal. The super strength of Jesus Burgess, the teleportation ability of Van Augur, and the sickness contagion abilities of Doc Q. And he says very specifically, these are abilities that the Blackbeard crew had gathered with their, like, devil fruit hunting adventures they were going on, right? They were going around the Grand Line, killing individuals that had very unique powers and stealing those powers for themselves. And this started about 2 years ago, right after Marineford, when Blackbeard killed Whitebeard and obtained the Gura no Mi. They were on these exploits all throughout the New World. They killed Absalom, for instance, who had the power of the clear fruit, and Shiryu got that ability. We know how devil fruit reincarnation works, at least partly, but we don't know the whole mechanics of this, so it could be something as simple as the Blackbeard crew know how to reincarnate the fruit, and then they just eat it to get the power, or they're directly killing the user and transferring the power, kind of the same thing that Blackbeard did with Whitebeard, though we don't know everything about this quite yet. It's going to be a secret, I'm sure, that's going to be revealed pretty soon, of how exactly Blackbeard crew got as powerful as they did, right? So, at least Law supposed, and I'm assuming Law kept tabs on the Blackbeard crew. I mean, they were a Yonko fleet after all. I'm going to go with Law and say that Doc Q actually did not have this power, previously, and he did obtain it during the time skip. Same thing with Van Auger getting the Warp fruit, and Burgess getting the Riki no Mi, the strong fruit. These are fruits that are absolutely perfectly suited for these individuals, so they're the ones that would get the most out of them. The same thing that Law is probably one of the best recipients of the Op fruit. The only other person I could think of that would probably utilize the Op fruit on the level of Law, if not better, would be like Dr. Kareha. But aside from her, I can't really think of anybody else. I mean, I guess there's Hiraluk, but he was a quack doctor after all, and Chopper already has a devil fruit, so he can't get it. This is actually the antithesis to what Chopper wants. Chopper wants to cure every disease, not cause every disease. Speaking of opposites, probably the opposite of Mancherry's heal fruit, an ability that heals most people. We actually don't know if it actually heals diseases. We've only ever seen it heal like physical wounds and cuts and abrasions and things like that. We've never seen her ability heal diseases, but I'm assuming it probably could, and this is the antithesis to that, right? Okay. So, what diseases have we seen so far? Well, we only have seen one, and it's actually a disease that Oda invented for the purposes of One Piece. It's a fantasy disease that doesn't really exist. Makes me kind of wonder whether or not Oda is going to go super real with this, where Doc Q is going to be able to spread super infectious diseases, like from our world, things that are really devastating, if Oda wants to go that serious with it, or just keep it to, because there are plenty of fantasy diseases in One Piece. I even made a video about them at one point, like the Amber Lead syndrome is one, which I just realized that could have been a messed up thing to do. Like, if Doc Q really can afflict anybody with any disease, it doesn't have to necessarily be an airborne thing or a contagious one. It could literally be a disease caused by things like touching the toxic chemicals of Amber Lead. How messed up would it have been if he afflicted Law with the Amber Lead syndrome? Or maybe he couldn't afflict Law because Law had already been cured from it once. What if he afflicted his entire crew with Amber Lead, so everybody except Law got that disease, and he would have to be like, no, Beppo, no, not Amber Lead syndrome? Like, that would have been psychologically just devastating, right? Maybe Doc Q didn't know about it, but maybe if he knew about Amber Lead syndrome, he could, afflict that disease, okay? But yeah, just to give you a quick rundown of some of the most deadly diseases that exist on our planet, to see what's in Doc Q's arsenal if Oda ever wants to break it out. We got tuberculosis, that's an airborne one. Malaria, which isn't really contagious. It's actually transferred via a vector. In this case, it would be mosquito bites. So we don't know the limits exactly what qualities the disease has to have, but if he could just, snap his fingers and give somebody malaria, that'd be pretty devastating. Cholera, which is actually caused by contaminated food and water. A lot of situations way back in the day when people were just, shitting in rivers and then using that water as their drinking water. Cholera reigned rampant, especially in England, during the times of the plague. Speaking of the plague, we have bubonic. We have things like influenza, obviously, A and B, that can be spread through via airborne. We all know COVID at this point. Things like HIV, AIDS, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C, things that are transferred via blood or sexual contact, or even hereditarily, they can pass from mother to child. Then we have Ebola, which is spread through blood and other bodily fluids. So yeah, I don't know, because these are serious diseases that kill, in some cases, millions of people every year in our world. So I don't know if, Oda's gonna give Doc Q, the tuberculosis ray or something like that. Or we could just keep it with, I'm just gonna make these diseases because they're not real and they can't hurt you, stuff like that. Now, the only disease we've seen him utilize so far was not even a disease that he did in an attempt to actually kill or harm members of the Heart Pirates. It was actually just kind of trying to distract them, disorientate them, just to kind of mess with them. And it was the feminization disease. Yeah, it's a disease that if you are born biologically male, it flips your sex to be biologically female. Kind of the same thing with Ivankov's hormone fruit, except in the case it doesn't flip everybody's sex, because Ikkaku was the only woman on the crew at this point, and it's not like her sex flipped so she became male. She stayed the same, I believe. It was only the male members of the Heart Pirates transformed into females, okay? And so in the Japanese, it's just feminization disease. Some of the translations in English have translated it to it's a play off of malady, changing it to malady. So malady, malady. So it's the malady disease, right? And that's like kind of a little pun there. And so that was what he used to kind of just mess with them. And he was even kind of laughing about it earlier. It's like, if I wanted to, I could give you a disease that could have you coughing up blood and could make you pass out and run like a 120-degree fever and just burn you out. But I decided to do this instead, just to kind of disorientate you, which makes sense. I mean, after all, boobs, the ultimate distraction. You know, it was like, oh no, boobs! I am distracted now. And then the rest of the Blackbeard crew just, aha! They are distracted, right? Okay. And Law was able to counter this, though. After his encounter with Kaido and Big Mom at Wano, he learned a very valuable lesson in dealing with devil fruit abilities that affect you. Haki counters all. So after being afflicted and having his sex flipped, he was like, oh, okay, well, let me just exert a crazy amount of haki and just push through this. And it took him some effort. It wasn't something that it was really easy for Law to do, but he was able to kind of push through and negate the effects of the disease on him, and he went back to the way he was. Not only that, but it created antibodies, like haki antibodies inside of Law for the malady or the malady disease, and then those antibodies spread just like how the disease was spread via like a contagion effect, where Law was afflicted and then Beppo was afflicted and then Sachi and Penguin and everybody else on the Heart Pirates were afflicted. When Law was cured, everybody else was cured as well. And Doc Q specifies that it's like, oh yeah, that's how it goes with every disease. Antibodies pop up at some point and you can't use that disease anymore. Oh well, I got some more in here. Yeah, Doc Q's basically like a really messed up disease Santa Claus, where he just has a big sack filled with very infectious diseases, right? So that was the only one we got to see him use. After that, it was more of a fight between Augur and then Burgess, and Blackbeard himself fought against Law, and Doc Q just kind of hung back a little bit there. Just to kind of give you the idea of what ability he has and the kind of damage he could bring with it if he really wanted to, right? If he really wanted to give them like a disease like tuberculosis to start coughing up blood and things like that, he could have done that. Remember some of the other diseases we have in One Piece. We had tree fever, the disease that afflicted everybody at not Skypiea, it was Shandora back in the day when it was still part of Jaya. We also have the disease that could have also been tree fever, or like a different variant of that afflicted Yorkie and half of the Rumbar crew. We have the disease that Buggy got right before they were about to go to Laughtail, which in one translation was stated to be can't go to that island disease, or I'll go and get a disease on that island, right? It's not actually called that, but it would have been funny if that actually was a disease, because Usopp kept saying that it was. So then we have unknown old man disease that, you know, afflicted Whitebeard and afflicted Roger and all sorts of characters that get really old. They just get unknown old man disease, right? We also have unknown mother disease, when mothers just get sick and they die, you know, like Banshina, who is Usopp's mom, you know, so you got to watch out for that. Like, these are some powerful illnesses that Doc Q could, like, just release upon the population at any given time. Something else very important to remember is the range of this devil fruit. The range alone is the thing that makes it absolutely terrifying, okay? Because Law and his crew were in the submarine, the Polar Tang, under the ocean, and they were diving under the ocean to try to get away from Blackbeard's crew, right? Even in those situations, and without Doc Q directly coming in contact with Law to, like, spread the disease through physical contact or whatever, he was able to just open up, like, I guess, a disease radius, or, you know, he's like the horseman of death, or I guess horseman of pestilence in this way, just kind of like, I afflict the disease upon ye, and then Law all of a sudden, you know, turned into a woman, you know, there we go, right? So if that's how this works, if Doc Q, who was flying on top of Stronger, way above the sea, afflicted Law's crew beneath the sea, inside of a submarine, and there was no, like, the only reason they were able to get out of that was because Law had strong enough haki. Oh my god, this is scary. And the fact that Doc Q used no other diseases throughout that entire fight. He was pulling his punches. He really was. Now, the fact that Doc Q is also very sick might encumber this a little bit. Like, the fact that, yeah, every now and then I guess he does get bursts of strength. He is able to, when they were fighting against Whitebeard, he did pull out some guns and start shooting Whitebeard. I think he had a double-bladed scythe he attacked with as well. They can move if they really have to, and it's definitely a situation similar to Blackbeard. Like, Blackbeard can get hit and feel lots of pain because of the Yami Yami no Mi, but he gets back up and ultimately he's perfectly fine, right? He feels pain a lot more, but that's not going to be the thing that's going to bring him down. Same thing with Doc Q. He might pass out a lot and might be crawling on the ground in agony of being like, hey there, how you doing? You want some apples? He might be like that, but he's never going to die because of those symptoms, if that makes sense, right? The ability, the sick fruit that he has now, honestly probably would work best for him, because maybe there is a byproduct that it makes the user sick all the time, but he was already sick all the time, so he's used to it. So that might be a thing. Like, this devil fruit was maybe avoided by most people because maybe there's an entry in the encyclopedia that says, hey, if you eat this fruit, you get this crazy powerful ability, but you are ill for the rest of your life. And people are like, okay, we don't want that. But Doc Q was like, hey, whatever, it doesn't matter. I was always sick ever since I was born. In fact, I think it actually is mentioned at one point. Hold on, let me just double check. He was born very chronically ill, which might kind of explain why he looks so much older than he really is. He's only in his late 20s, and you can mistake him for in his 60s or maybe even like a 70-year-old man, right? A lot of people have pointed out he kind of looks like Dr. Hiraluk, just because Dr. Hiraluk had a very distinctive face with the stubble and the gray hair. Doc Q, the same thing. They're not the same person, probably not even like brothers, but considering the fact that Dr. Hiraluk, he died when he was 68 years old, and that was 7 years ago for Chopper's backstory. Dr. Hiraluk would be 75 years old right now, as Doc Q is 28. It's not completely impossible that he could be Dr. Hiraluk's son. We know that Dr. Hiraluk was in a place in the West at one point, and he was a thief at some point. We know that, and we know he was afflicted with a horrible disease. So it's possible that he was afflicted with maybe some kind of chronic illness, and then when he had a child with his partner, the child, Doc Q, could have also been afflicted with that illness, like a hereditary type of thing. And Hiraluk said that when he saw the cherry blossoms of Drum Island that like cured his illness, it didn't really cure, I don't think, his physical illness. It cured like the illness of heart. Like, that was the whole point of why he wanted cherry blossoms to bloom. Oh wait, no, he didn't see the cherry blossoms at Drum. He saw the cherry blossoms at another unrelated place, which could have been Wano, and that's what made him like change his perspective of life around, and he eventually came back to Drum, right? So I guess he was originally from Drum, then went to the West, was a thief for a little while. It's not impossible that he could be the father of Doc Q, especially considering Doc Q is going to be fighting against Chopper, because the Blackbeard crew is the evil opposite to the Straw Hats. We know for certain Zoro is going to fight Shiryu, Augur is going to fight against Usopp, and Chopper's going to fight against Doc Q and Stronger. I can't wait for the scene. I really want this. The scene where Chopper starts speaking to Stronger, and I want to hear what Stronger's opinions are on all this. I really do. Is Stronger like okay with hanging out with the Blackbeard crew? Is he's like we're gonna kill you, Straw Hat Pirates, and then Stronger speaks like, we're gonna kill the Straw Hat Pirates, nay, and then Chopper is like, oh yeah, he's a bad horse, he wants to kill us. Or is Stronger going to be like, nay, help me, this old man's been making me sick for years, please, But no, it seems like Stronger and Doc Q are like good friends, and they're like loyal to one another, right? So that's the situation there. Yeah, I want to see that fight at some point, and considering the fact that Chopper literally wants to cure every illness, Doc Q, not exaggerating, is the physical embodiment of pestilence and plague and pretty much every disease you can imagine. Yeah, it's there. So, right. When it comes to an awakening, it's already a crazy large range. It's already a thing that can make you sick. Maybe, considering the esoteric nature of devil fruits, we could have the diseases begin to affect non-living objects. Which makes very little sense, but it's One Piece, right? And so he makes it so if the rocks and the buildings around you become to get, like, illnesses, right? Actually, you know what? That would make sense in One Piece. Oda could invent illnesses that, like, I don't know, the jelly illness that turns your bones into jelly, right? So he afflicts you with this, and he's like, oh no, my bones are jelly, and you just, fall apart right there. That could be a disease that Oda could create in this world, like, no problem, right? And then there could be a disease like, building decay or whatever, like rock decay, like, I'll give that rock an illness, or that brick building an illness that only hurts bricks, like he can literally change the pathogen to affect non-living things, and then, buildings rot and fall apart. Kind of similar to, like, Baragon's Respira technique in Bleach that causes everything to rot and age around him, not just living flesh. That would be the only way I could think an awakening of this fruit could exist, and also, like, there's, like, and it's not even something that's unprecedented. Remember, we had, Magellan's venom fruit with, at the beginning, it really was just poison that affected living people, but then when he goes into his venom demon, it just turns into straight up acid, like horrible caustic acid that begins to erode and dissolve the very foundation of Impel Down. So it doesn't even affect, like, living things at that point. It made the jump to, like, rock and stone. Same thing with this, right? So or even if it doesn't affect the buildings, it could be just like, yeah, if you step on the ground that's afflicted with this illness, you get it, and you start coughing up blood like crazy. Maybe illnesses that can petrify you, just going with D&D logic, right? Petrification's one of the most devastating things that can happen to you in D&D. There's only certain spells that are pretty high level that can nullify it, right? So, like, the petrification disease, so you just turn into a stone statue. Like, Oda could have a lot of fun with this, and honestly, it kind of hopes that he does stay away from, like, real-life illnesses. Although, you could totally have a scene where Doc Q is going up against one of the Straw Hats or something, and Chopper's going to fight him, and then Chopper all of a sudden just starts hacking up blood and just, like, losing his fur and everything. Like, what's happening to me? You know what I mean? And it just could be this horrible disease. Or it could be like, I'm going to turn your bones into jelly. Or it could be really weird diseases that don't even do anything. Like, this is a disease that turns your hair blue. That's the only thing it does here. And then Chopper's hair turns blue, and he's like, what? No, only my nose was supposed to be blue. This makes no sense. Oh, what if it's a disease that turns your nose red? So Chopper essentially just becomes Rudolph at that point, and also we find out that that was Buggy's thing the whole time. He had a disease that turned his nose red. Oh man, there's some options for hilarity for this, but also a lot of things that are horrifying. Pretty easy to explain, but a lot of multifaceted things he could do here. So let me know down below. Create some fictional diseases that you think would fit in the One Piece world. Stuff we haven't seen yet that Doc Q could come up with. Could he also invent his own diseases? That malady or malady disease, the feminization disease that he used against Law's crew, was that something that actually exists in the One Piece world? Because we never heard of that before. Or was that something that Doc Q just invented? Did he just come up with something like that? Like, yes, I will just turn your bones to bananas. That's the disease I give you. And just, like, not a disease that existed. In fact, that would even be crazier because Chopper wouldn't have any idea what the hell he's even talking about. Like, diseases that turn your bones into bananas, that doesn't even make sense. And then he uses it and he's like, oh man, Chopper's like, I gotta take notes. I gotta go back to medical school. This is crazy. Trying to solve or cure diseases that are being made up on the spot by a madman. I have walked in places where the laws of physics and germ theory were designed by a madman. That's basically what we're dealing with here, yeah. Okay, that's the video. Hope you all enjoyed. I'm starting to feel better. I felt kind of sick at the beginning, but now I feel perfectly okay. I'm good now that the video's over. There we go. All right, next one is going to be Van Auger's warp fruit. This is my fruit. This is the teleportation fruit. I've been waiting for this one for a while. The portal devil fruit. All right. Thanks for watching. Teching signing out. See you back here next time.